Hey there, welcome. My name is Jessica Buchanan, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author, professional speaker, and founder of Soul Speak Press, a non-traditional publishing company created for women who've been through something, now they know something, and they can teach us something. In Her Words is a podcast designed to support aspiring memoir authors on their writing and publishing journey. It's hard work, this writing and publishing stuff, and I want to empower you with encouragement and information so you can keep sharing your truth. So grab your coffee, your notebook, find a quiet space, and let's dive in. I am so excited today because normally you're probably used to hearing me just talk to myself, to you for 25, 30 minutes. And I'm not going to do that to you today. I have a very special guest. Today we have Alyssa Ages. She's a journalist and the author of Secrets of Giants, A Journey to Uncover the True Meaning of Strength. She's also a strong woman athlete, marathoner, and Ironman finisher. I don't really even know what to do with those words. And may I add to this, you're a memoirist now. And so, Alyssa, thanks so much for coming on In Her Words.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your book, in your memoir. And is this your first book, or have you're a journalist, so you're a professional writer? But kind of like walk us through this journey, if you will.
Yeah, so it is my first book. And it's really interesting. So I had been a journalist really early on in my career. I worked mostly in music journalism. So I was at MTV News, I was at Vibe, I was at Spin. And then I left that world for like a decade and I went into marketing.
Okay.
Um, and I had just had my second daughter. So this was 2021, no, 2020 when I was starting this. And I realized I really missed writing and I wanted to get back into it. And I had absolutely no idea how to just jump back in. I mean,
Mhm.
10 years and there's not as much print media. Everything
Mhm.
has kind of changed.
Yeah.
So one of the things I knew was I was going to have to refigure out how the heck to go start pitching again.
Mhm.
So I reached out to a friend who knew some people who were kind of really active in the journalism world. And they recommended a woman by the name of Susan Shapiro. And she teaches a class on pitching.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a five
I
week
know
course.
her. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I signed up for her class, and she has editors zoom into each one of the classes. So you get to make a lot of contacts kind of right away. And then you come up with pitches, she reviews them, she gives you feedback. And you can kind of go off and maybe try to pitch some of these editors. So it was really, really good for me because my past life in journalism was I was never writing about myself, right? I
Mhm.
was always profiling a band or writing a review of a CD or whatever it was. That was my understanding of how, I was going to approach journalism. And Sue kind of explained, well, you have to put you in it. People
Mhm.
care about your story. What's your personal connection? Which was super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We'd had an editor come in from Wired, and I thought, okay, I want to write for Wired. What am I going to do here? And I wanted to write about the growth of virtual races during COVID, like virtual running races when you
Right.
couldn't go in person. And she kind of pushed me like, well, what's your story with that, with doing virtual races? And it was like this weird, uncomfortable space to be in. But I, recreated a pitch that had my story in it, sent it off, and ended up getting that piece accepted. And that was my first kind of entree back into journalism. And when I secured the piece, Sue said, okay, when they ask you for your bio at the end of the piece, you should put in, whatever book it is that you want to write. And I was like, I don't have a book that I want
Book,
to write.
book,
A book.
book I'm supposed to be writing? What?
And and she was like, "Well, if you think that you might ever want to write a book, you want to put it in your bio in these articles because sometimes agents read these pieces and they like your
Mhm.
style and, that maybe they reach out to you about a book." So I was like, "Okay, well, what do I know?"
Mhm.
I know the world of strength sports. At this point I had been doing strongman for years, and I was like, "Okay, Alyssa Aegis is a freelance journalist in Toronto and she's writing a book about strongman." And that was it. Once you put that out there in the world, people start going, "You're writing a book about strongman?" And so I had to start thinking about this book that I was going to be writing about
Well,
strongman.
I'm glad you asked because yes, I am.
Sure, let me tell you all about it. So I luckily had a really wonderful author friend who I went to university with, who lives in the same city as me. We went for a coffee walk, and he was like, "Cool idea. Don't write a book about strongman. There are not nearly enough people who know or care about that world to buy it.
Mhm.
Write about your experience." And so we kind of went back and forth with like, what is this going to look like? And I thought, okay, well, I still want to kind of write the history of this subculture, but sure, I can write it about my story, my journey to, into this world. So it's just you're kind of following along, kind of like Born to Run,
Okay.
where you're sort of following him into this like secret tribe of ultra marathoners.
Okay.
Uh, the more that I wrote and the more that, I kind of was like trying to put in little bits of me into this, sort of burgeoning proposal idea, the more I was like, okay, yep, nope, more of that, more of that. I ended up hiring this friend of mine to be a proposal consultant, which is something he was already doing and
Yeah.
I did not know existed.
Okay.
But
We're
basically,
gonna tap that in just a minute.
yeah.
So,
But basically, he, worked with me through every step of writing this proposal. And along the way, he would go, more about your story, more
mhm.
about your story. I would go off on a tangent about some weird history thing in strength sports. And he was like, more you, more you. And in the end, this became what I like to call kind of part memoir, part research mission, part midlife crisis odyssey
Yeah.
into the world of strength, because it truly became about me doing this at the age of 40 as a mom of two kids who decided, I think I'd like to pull a 50-ton truck with my body and maybe find out why that is a weird goal that is driving me to do this. Um,
All of that. Yeah.
yeah, that's basically the story.
Oh my gosh. I have so many questions and I love it. Um, it's so interesting to me as someone who has been writing about myself and talking about myself for the last decade that it would be like it's a hard switch to think about talking about yourself and writing about yourself, which I don't know what that says about me. But and again, I have lots of stories to share that I still haven't shared, but the main one, I mean, sometimes I joke that I'm a one-trick pony, but the main story people want to hear is the real hard story, right? The trauma. And I typically tend to lean into that with my clients and authors that work with us. They have hard stuff that they want to talk about and write about. And so oftentimes when you're reading about you know, like Jane Friedman or reading content or material to like up your memoir writing game, there are these prompts about like getting you started on what to write about. And that always confuses me because I'm like, wait a second, writers can come into this and not know what they want to write about.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really important thing to note on your journey and how just following your curiosity has led you down this path and where you're at now,
Yeah. Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
so,
It
so very
was,
cool.
yeah, yeah, it was it feels very just like you're very exposed.
Mm,
And there were a lot of things I really didn't want to write about at first that turned out to be the things that resonated with people the most. And it was interesting because I really thought that writing about going through a miscarriage and kind of how that led me to really want to explore the way that strength impacted my
mhm,
life and my kind of healing from that. And that has resonated with a lot of people. But interestingly, the chapter that I wrote about body image and this idea of kind of learning for the first time in my life to pursue taking up space instead of being smaller, that seemed to be the thing that people really have attached themselves onto and have seen themselves in. And that, I mean, I'm so proud of that.
yeah, I mean, what does that feel like to have, I guess, moved past and through the discomfort of writing about yourself to the space of people like knowing some really intimate details of your emotional journey? Like, what does that
Yeah,
feel like now?
it's still weird, but I'm much more comfortable with it. I think because I've seen how much it's meant to people.
Mhm.
Um, that that makes the whole process of doing that really worth it. Um, because you write a book, you want to impact someone's life.
Yeah.
And I think not every book will do that in a different way, but knowing that someone is seeing how they feel in something that I wrote, And also, and my book also has the stories of like 50 different athletes.
Mhm.
And so if people don't find themselves in my story, they find themselves in one of theirs. And what a privilege to have been able to tell their stories too.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process itself in terms of let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Like, how long did it take you to write this manuscript? And then what was the process like in terms, so you said you worked with a proposal consultant,
Yeah.
which is something we haven't really talked about on here. I do talk a lot about agents and proposals and that whole journey. Um, Maybe we could start from that coffee walk.
Yeah.
And could you walk us through what your process was like?
Yeah. So this is my friend David. He's a five-time author. His most recent book was called The Future of Analog. So he writes all nonfiction.
Okay.
And he's really no nonsense. And just every time I had these other ideas of what I was going to do, he was like, bring it back to you. Bring it back to you. How is it your story? One of the first things I did for writing a proposal was I literally Googled, like, how do you structure a nonfiction proposal?
Yeah.
Um, and so I knew a bit about how it was going to look. The first thing he had me do was I had to distill down what this 70,000 word book was going to be into the back of jacket copy. So like 2 paragraphs, which is so hard.
So
And
hard,
that hasn't
especially
gone
if you
well.
haven't written it yet, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because you don't
That
really
shit,
know
that like,
where it's going to go.
yeah, no idea.
Yeah.
And to make it more complicated, this book was I was writing this as I was experiencing it.
Mm.
So I truly didn't know where it was going to end. I thought it was going to end with one thing and it ended with something completely different because that's just how the year went.
Right.
Um, and oddly enough, in the first version of that back of jacket copy I wrote, there was a sentence that had the words "Secrets of Giants" in it. And I think it was actually my husband who looked at that and was like, "That's your title. Like
Ah,
that's it." So that's kind of crazy.
yeah.
So we did that, and then it was moving on to, okay, now you have to write your overview.
Hmm.
And then, okay, now I want you to write a longer version of that. And
Hmm.
once we did that, it was okay, chapter outlines.
Hmm.
Until, piece by piece, we had this proposal. I had the idea in December of 2020,
Okay.
and the proposal was ready to be sent out in June of
Okay.
2021.
Okay.
So, yes,
2021.
yeah, there's a few months of working on it.
Okay, okay. Okay, so that's not too bad. And I think it's important to like note that most of the time if you're writing nonfiction or memoir, to shop it around, you don't need to have the manuscript finished,
Right.
which is different from fiction. You know,
Yes.
usually like when you're shopping a fiction manuscript around, if they're interested, they're going to ask for the entire thing, but that doesn't happen in nonfiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Nonfiction, you've got to do basically you're sort of like, this is my pitch for what the book I want to write but haven't written yet. You do have to include a sample chapter,
Yep.
but it's interesting that a lot of what I've heard is that they're looking at the marketing stuff first, which is
Hmm.
really interesting. Since I had a background in marketing, I felt really confident about that part of it. Like, okay, I know how I can sell this book.
Okay.
Um,
So give us some examples of like something.
so yeah, they want to know. I mean, first of all, a lot of nonfiction books are based on someone's platform. Now,
Mhm.
I didn't have that, right? Other than the fact that I was writing for a bunch of publications by this point, I don't have this big social media platform, which is they really look for that.
Were you worried about that being a barrier to you selling the book?
You know what? I think there was a real good level of ignorance where I didn't know if that was going to matter. And so I just operated under the assumption that it wouldn't, and that because I had been a writer for so long, the writing would sell itself. But I did also write, I think, a really good marketing section where I included the audience, the platform of all the athletes I was going to be interviewing. So,
Mm.
with the assumption that they would all promote it on their social media, I was able to say, okay, well, I can reach X number of people. Maybe they're not on my social media, but they are on my athletes' social media. I had that. I also knew that CrossFit, for example, which was going to be included in my book, is a $4 billion industry.
Right.
So, I knew there was a chance that we would get a lot of CrossFit athletes buying this.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of was able to like pull those numbers out of things and go, okay, this is how I see the platform for this.
Hmm. That's brilliant.
Um,
And who did you distinguish as your like primary audience?
yeah, I wanted it to be clear that this was not a book just for people who already care about strength. To
Okay.
me, because I was talking a lot about my kind of journey as, going through pregnancy loss and going through fertility stuff and going through, then becoming a mom and how important all of this was to me as far as, what I could teach my kids. I really felt like a huge audience for me would be moms, and
Hmm.
it has been.
Yeah.
Is right
Well,
about
I
it.
mean, that's why I was interested. I
Yeah.
heard your episode, your interview on We Should Talk About That with Jess
Yeah.
Kidwell, who is my former co-host. And I was like enamored by you and
Oh,
your book
thank you.
because I'm a middle-aged woman who's perimenopausal and trying to, build up my strength as a form of self-care and preventative medicine. And that was like the history and the statistics and the science behind that mixed with the memoir helps my little pea brain like actually like hold on to the information. That's why I picked the book up
Oh, I love
because
that.
I'm never gonna do an Ironman or woman or whatever. I was at a 6 hour track meet last night for my kids and I was like, oh dear God, why do people do this? But, but I'm interested in aging healthfully. And
Yeah.
so, why maybe I'm not your primary target reader, you still caught me,
That's
right?
that. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And that's it, right? I want one of the things I talk about now in a lot of just my writing, my freelance writing is about strength going into perimenopause and menopause because I'm getting close to that too. And so, and the number of women that I've known in my life who've been like, oh yeah, well, I stay fit by walking. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, it's not even a negotiable. Like you
Yeah,
have to do strength training,
yeah,
which I could go off on a whole separate soapbox about that, but I won't. But
yeah,
it means so much to me that women who are going into that stage of life are picking this up now and getting inspired by it. That's huge.
yeah.
Like, as you said, you don't have to pull a truck,
Right.
but maybe what's your version of pulling a truck?
Right.
What's
Like
that
I
thing
want to
that
be
feels out
able
of
to like open a pickle jar.
yeah.
And like I have goals. Like I want to climb mountains and I want to, like do long distance trekking and so, like
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean that's impact, right? Which I want to like kind of circle back around to that in just a minute. Because and again, we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details, but I'm committed to while I want this podcast and this platform to be inspirational, I also want it to be educational and I'm pretty like real talk here and I want like aspiring authors and current authors to understand the realities of the traditional publishing as well as the non-traditional publishing and everything in between. So, can you tell us a little bit then? Okay, so we got through the proposal writing process, and then what happened? Like, did you get an agent? Did you shop it around yourself? Like, what was that process like, and how long did it take?
So part of the deal with the agreement that I had with David was that he would send it to his agent first
Oh,
and give his agent the first crack at it,
okay.
which was cool with me because his agent is, a really big name in the industry.
Uh-huh.
And I was lucky enough that his agent liked it and did
Oh,
want to sign me.
okay.
So that was great.
Yeah.
And then he didn't make any changes to the proposal, very like minor little things, and then started shopping it around. And we had one publisher that was interested right away
Okay.
and wanted to do a preempt. We had another publisher that was also interested. So I spoke to both of them. And in the end, I really liked the first publisher.
Okay.
I just felt like they were the most excited about it.
Hmm.
Like I
Hmm.
thought both of them could have done great things with it, but when you can feel that like someone is really jazzed about something you're
Yes.
working on. That's
Yes.
how I
Which
felt.
is so important.
Yeah,
You need to weigh that against all of the things that they're offering because you're in it for the long haul here, right?
yeah,
Like this is another 50-ton truck that you're pulling
that's right.
across the finish
Yeah,
line,
yeah.
metaphorically speaking, as my 11-year-old would say. Um, So tell me how you knew they were excited about it. Like, what were some of those signs?
So the first thing was that the publisher was the first one who was interested,
Mm.
and she was a lifter herself.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So she really championed it. And then just, I don't even, it was a couple years ago now, so I don't really remember all the details, but I just remember on the phone, like she was talking about her experience in lifting. Everyone sounded so excited about this. And they would say things like, I can't, this is going to mean a lot to so many people.
Mm.
I was like, yeah, you get it. You get it.
Yeah.
And so that was July that I signed with
Okay.
them.
So that didn't take you very long at all.
No, that was very quick. From
Yeah.
from an agent signing me to a publisher signing me was really fast, and
Oh my
I
gosh,
recognize that that
that's
is
incredible.
not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that
Yeah.
is, yeah, it's pretty unique. And I basically said a year to write the manuscript. So I spent a year writing the manuscript. And then this part was pretty traditional, which is like I submitted it, and then it was another year before it hit shelves.
Okay. So the whole process was like 2 years.
Yeah, it was yeah, I had the idea in December 2020, actually almost three. The idea was in December 2020, and the book published September 2023.
And did that feel like a really long time? Did that feel like a good
That
amount of time?
year where you wait from submitting the manuscript, like I went from just constantly sitting and writing and editing and whatever until like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with myself?
Yeah.
I was really, because you don't know when the edits are going to come in,
Hmm.
right? So you kind of can't just be like, oh, I'll take on this new project because
Right.
you don't know when the edits are going to come in. You don't know how massive they're going to be. So this waiting period just stunk. And this is all the like full transparency stuff. The process of trying to get blurbs is awful. It's
Like
awful.
endorsements.
I mean, I hated, there's just no way of sugarcoating it. I hated it. And I found solace in the fact that so many authors I spoke to who had done this multiple times said, it doesn't get better. You
Hmm.
will hate this forever.
Hmm.
Asking people for blurbs is always terrible. I
What
was
do you
like,
think that's about? Like, because people will ask me
yeah,
for endorsements from time to time, and I find I'm like, I try really hard to like, if I say yes, then I'm gonna follow through. But then I'm like, gosh darn it, they like email me for the third time asking me for it. What's wrong? Like, why can't I? I mean, all I have to do is write a sentence.
yeah.
It's not hard. What is that about our psychology? Like, what I don't, why is that so hard?
I don't know. I mean, it's the part about being the author asking, I think, is that you are reaching out to people that you really admire.
Mhm.
And maybe you've like always kind of looked up to their writing and wanted to write like them, and now you're sending them your writing and being like, hi, look at this, I hope it's half as good as what you've written,
Mhm.
and also can you say something nice about it?
Yeah.
And it was just a really crummy process. A lot of people that I wanted to do it said no. People don't respond to you. People say they're going to do it and they don't do it. In the end, I mean, the blurbs I ended up having on the back of the book, I could not be more proud of. They're just really, really incredible people who said yes and wrote really, really nice things. So, it ended up great, but it's really soul sucking.
Yeah. It's a
Just to get
hustle.
through it.
I don't think that there's any way around like
No,
parts of this process, even if
yeah,
you do like magically get the your book purchased in a couple of months and
yeah,
like there are parts of this process what I mean it's just a hustle
yeah,
either way. Okay, so then talk to us a little bit about your marketing plan
yeah,
and what that has been like because one thing I notice first of all like just book launches in general have changed so much over the
yes,
course of, I don't know, the decade since my first
yeah,
book came out. Everybody dreams, every author I know, every memoirist dreams of walking into Barnes and Noble and seeing their book on, the new releases shelves or the bestseller shelves. And I get that. I have had that experience. I don't think I understood. I should have appreciated it more. But I don't know. Um, and it's interesting because I had someone put me in contact with an author whose book was about to be published, and it was a little bit more on the academic side, but there was memoir included. And she asked for a PR firm recommendation. Um, because like I think largely traditional publishing houses do not invest in the marketing and the PR the way they used to. And they do for maybe like 1 or 2% of their top authors. So I put her in contact with a PR company that I had worked with that I had been really happy with. They had got me some big fish, and we'd had a lot of success with them. And so she reached out to me a couple months later. Her book launches, or the publishing date is like upon us, and she was so frustrated and really disappointed and kind of like mad at me for recommending them because they had booked her on all kinds of podcasts and like television interviews, but not gotten her a multi-city book tour like she had wanted. And they were like, yeah, we don't really do that. And I said, I don't really think many agencies really do that anymore. We have this vision that we're going to have all these like book signings and these book stores and in Barnes and Noble, but the reality is that like 75% of all book sales happen online. And so I was just trying to explain to her like, yeah, I mean, this is just like kind of how the publishing world is now. And she was really disappointed. And I understand that. But can you kind of speak to that in your
Yeah.
experience?
Oh yeah. I can't stress enough how little of what I thought would happen around the time the book was coming out and then in the months since actually happened.
Oh, thank you
Because,
for saying that. Thank you for just being honest.
yeah, oh
I
yeah.
think people think I'm like lying.
No, it is. And again, this was a traditional publisher, right? It was just like all the things I thought would happen. It was so different. So yeah, nobody talked to me about a launch event.
Mm.
Nobody talked to me about a book tour. When I asked, it was, yeah, we don't really recommend that because like people aren't going to show up. And I was like, do you just not believe in this book anymore? Like what happened? And then, I set up a bunch of my own dates and I paid for everything myself. I booked the places I was going to. And my Toronto launch, because I live here, was packed. But if I looked at that room, it's it's people who know me. It's
Yeah.
my friends and family. It's not
Yes.
random people who saw it on the bookstore's Instagram and decided to come. I
Right.
did one in New York. There were a handful of people that I didn't know, probably in large part because I had a co-host. So for all, this is also a big thing. For all of my book events, I had a co-host. And I looked for someone who was bigger than me that
Mhm.
would be a draw on their own.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like in New York, I had Jess Gross, who's a Times columnist.
Okay.
And so a fair amount of people in the room were there because she was there, which was great because
Right.
come for her and then also learn about my book.
Right.
Um, but when I did an event in LA, where I have a very, very, very tiny network, it was a very, very, very small event
Mm.
because I realized like people aren't, you have to be an established author for a room to fill up with people who want to
Yeah.
hear you speak. Because it's one thing for someone to just make a $30 commitment to buying your book on the
Yeah.
internet or in a bookstore. And it's another thing for someone to commit to giving you an hour minimum, not including travel time of their life to come and see you talk about that book that perhaps they haven't even read yet. And I don't think I really appreciated that. So that was dramatically different from what I expected. Um, I thought that print coverage was going to be the be all end all. Podcasts move the needle more than anything
Yes.
else.
Yes.
Anything else. I had no idea. But
Mhm.
like I am on podcast constantly because this is
Yes.
the best thing.
Yeah.
And even as you said, like you heard me on that other podcast, I
Totally.
think, as much as no one's going to come to hear you talk if they don't know who you are, if someone's already a listener of a podcast and then you go on there, they're already committed to giving that podcast host a half an hour of their time. Now they get to hear you and you are vetted by that host. So that
Mhm.
makes a big difference.
Yes. That's a really important thing to note. That in and of itself is an endorsement.
Yep.
That is really, really good to note.
Yeah. They're not going to have you on if they don't like, not everybody's read your book cover to cover when you go on, but at least they know enough about you that they trust that, the
Yeah.
book, the
And
rest
they
of the
want
book,
to have like give you some time for conversation
they
and
want
give
to
you
give you your
their
time.
time to
Yeah.
their audience, right? So that in and of
Exactly.
itself is an endorsement.
Yeah.
Um, so how did that feel that
Oh, it was awful. It was
was
awful. A friend of mine who's a fellow author, has said, she's like, I think the worst thing I did for my career was write a book. And I was like, I think it's the best thing I did for my career because I have gotten so much more like freelance work out of it. I have a column in the newspaper, the biggest newspaper in Canada. I have, speaking engagements now that I get paid to do. But I
Yeah.
think it's the worst thing I did for my mental health.
Oh,
It is, it's just, it's soul crushing. Like you write this thing, you spend years putting it together, and then you are just out there. I feel at times like I'm standing on a street corner with a bullhorn, like hawking individual copies to get them sold.
yeah.
When you do that thing where you go online in the morning and you look at your sales numbers and you
I
constantly do
don't do
that.
that anymore.
The best thing I did for my mental health was at the 6 month mark, I forced myself to stop looking at Goodreads.
Mm,
Not because the reviews were not good, but
right, right,
because I was like trying to accumulate more of them and it was so slow.
right.
And so I stopped doing that. I actually literally have no idea what Goodreads looks like now.
Yep.
It's been months.
Yep.
Um, but I look at the sales numbers. I think that like one of the things that I now tell anybody who is getting ready to publish a book is if you don't know for sure that you are going to be the most, like the biggest, most important, top of the list championed author by your publisher the month that your book comes out, hire an independent publicist.
Hmm.
I did that like right after my book came out when I kind of realized it a little bit late.
Okay.
I hired a publicist whose specific expertise is getting people on podcasts.
Hmm.
So that was just a wonderful investment. He's incredible. And I've been telling him, like, you need to expand to other things like print and TV and whatever, because you could sell anything to anyone.
Yeah.
I will shout him out. His name is Jackson Musker, and he is for hire, and he is wonderful. Um, because I think he's great.
So awesome. We need more of those connections. We need this
Mhm.
network to be able to trust people. I think it's so overwhelming. You've been in this industry for a very long time. So between marketing and journalism, but so many of the authors that I come into contact with, like they really don't know what
Yep.
they're doing. Like they've had this whole life, this whole career, and this amazing story, and now they want to put that out into the world. But who can they trust? How much is too much money to spend? What should I invest in? What should I not? Am I being taken advantage of? Like it's really scary and paralyzing, and then they don't get their story out there. And that to me is the real tragedy, right? So
Yeah.
hearing, we'll get the information and we'll put it in the show notes actually. So
Yeah.
if you're
Happily.
endorsing them,
Yes.
I trust that. Um, I just really appreciate you being transparent about your experience and the process and the journey. Because it's so easy to romanticize. Um,
Yeah.
and I was talking to one of my authors a couple weeks ago, and I said something, and she laughed out loud, and she's like, "That's the thing I like about you. You like tell it how it really is. You don't spare anybody's feelings." And I like kind of sat back and like I thought about that for a couple of days because I was like, geez, like what? Like, am I like super negative about this whole like I don't want to be that way, but at the same time, I want authors to be successful, and I don't want their mental health to suffer
Yeah.
because they've been through enough. And so just shedding a light on like the reality of it, I think is really important and is
It's
such a
super
service.
necessary. Yeah, I mean, you have to be your own biggest champion. I really can't stress that part of it enough. I like there there were things where like I talked myself into a meeting with the person that makes the decisions of what's going to go on the tables at Indigo. I like literally just talked myself into a meeting with them. And, eventually they were like, so this does have to go through your publisher. But like naivete was great for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I got on the phone with the book buyer from Costco. Like these things where I was just like, I don't know if anyone else is doing this behind the
Yes.
scenes.
Yes.
So
And they're probably not. And so
yeah, like
it's
that's
like being
great.
in the medical system. You have to be your own advocate.
Yeah, actually, one thing I wished I had done earlier that I did a little bit later was I had these postcards made with blurbs and press from the book, and I put the ISBN of my book on
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
And I will go into independent bookstores now because it turns out the big ones don't like when you do that. I learned that.
Yeah.
But the little stores are really open about it. So I just walk in and I give them the card. I tell them about the book. I'm like, the ISBN's on here. I hope you'll consider carrying it.
Yeah.
And like one of actually the things that I don't know ultimately if I had anything to do with this, but so my book, I don't know how many copies they bought to begin with, but I'm based in Toronto. And so Indigo is our biggest, big chain bookseller here.
Yep. Yep.
Indigo had
It's
sold
our
out.
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, they had
Yep.
sold out of the original run of books. Now, again, I don't know how many that was.
Sure.
Um, but I started to notice, I'm like, the stores are still out of stock. This was like months later. What is going on? And I'd been told, oh, they automatically replenish, they automatically replenish. But I just kept pushing. And PS, now all the stores have a couple copies. I looked recently, they have more. And what I'll do is I'll look at all the stores in my area and I'll see who has like more than two copies, let's say. And I will go to that store and I will sign all of their copies. And I made these little promotional stickers. I hide them inside the book. And then I post about it. And I say, like, hey, if you're near this one and you want a signed copy and some freebies, this is where to go find it. One store already re-upped. Like they got more books after that happened, after I went and did that. It turned out, and I drove 45 minutes to this store just because they had 7 copies. And I was like, I got to see this store that has 7 copies of my book. Like you start to know where they
Yeah.
position things. And I was like, there's no way they have 7 spine out on a shelf. Like they have to be somewhere else. And I went and sure enough, it was on an end cap in like a major bookseller chain. And I was like, I'm so happy I came out here. This is the coolest
Yes.
thing to see because for every time that happens, you will walk into 50 bookstores that don't have a single copy.
Mhm.
Which was the one that killed me was the Strand. I'm like, you have miles of books. It's right there on your sign.
Yeah.
You can't put one in your miles of books,
Yeah.
but then my brother-in-law went into the McNally Jackson store in Soho and they had 2 books facing out. So it's like, it's this dance of something amazing, something kind of crappy, but
Right.
you sort of have to learn how to ride that wave.
Yeah. Well, and also just to like be informed, like you are active. Like when did the book publish?
September.
Okay. And so we are in May.
Yeah.
And you've been like I've been watching you. I see you on social media. You are out there hustling.
Yeah.
You are
Much.
pounding the pavement,
Yep.
and I think again, it's so important to see, if I may make that distinction, a traditionally published author, a
Yeah.
professional writer doing the same thing that we're all doing out here
Yep.
in self-published, non-traditional hybrid publishing
Yeah.
land. Um, because I hear this all the time from authors. I have one friend who's getting ready to publish traditionally, I think in September, and I keep like he and I have similar stories. And so I'm like, okay, well, like how'd your meeting with your marketing team go? And let's see how this is gonna go, and we're both kind of like, ooh. So it's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Me too.
Fascinating.
I'm
Yeah.
constantly learning.
Yeah, yeah. But also, I think if you take that, like, have that mindset and that approach of like, I'm learning so much about this industry and about its self-marketing, right? I mean, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is like, is it hard for you to talk about yourself now? Has it
You
gotten
know
easy?
what? Less so now.
Yeah, yeah,
Less so now. I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it. And a lot of the writing that I get asked to do, they do want me to include my own experience in there. Like
yeah,
my column in the Globe and Mail, I usually do a mix. Like if the topic is something I can really relate to from my own experience, I put myself in there because I think that that's really now I understand how valuable that is.
yeah.
But if it's not, then I take the step back and I'm just, I'm the researcher, I'm the writer, I'm taking other people's stories. So I did do a piece recently on the importance of strength training in perimenopause. Now, I'm not there yet. I'm
Yeah.
probably, within a couple of years of it, but I was like, okay, this isn't my story now to tell. This is
Right.
someone else's story. So I'm going to tell theirs.
So before we wrap up, I have one last question.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll write another book?
I am in the process of doing a ghostwriting project. So I'm
Ooh,
helping
what's
someone
that
else. Yeah, I'm helping someone else shop around his book,
like?
which I can be the ghostwriter on. I can't really say anything about it yet because we're
Yeah,
still in the
sure.
stopping process.
Yep, yep.
Um, but I am really, really, really excited about it. I'm excited because I'm super excited about this author. I'm excited
Mhm.
about his story. I can't wait to tell it. I'm also selfishly excited that, it's the promotion of it for the most part is on somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. That must feel
We're
good.
talking about having my name as like the with on the cover, so it
Mhm.
would be out there, but no, but in this scenario, no one cares about what I have to say about it. They all are going to want to just talk to him. So, yeah, I'm excited to like go back into the writing trenches without the promotional trenches.
That's really fascinating and really interesting. And I think um authors need to think about that. It's not it's
To
not
promote.
just writing
Yeah.
the book, it's selling it
Yeah.
too, which we talk about with our anthology authors, a lot. So what are you reading right now?
I am reading. So because I am starting this ghostwriting journey, I'm reading Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Because I did not know this. He had a ghostwriter, and his
Uh-huh.
ghostwriter, this guy is like the most prolific person ever. Turns out he's the ghostwriter for Prince Harry's book and Agassi's book, Andre Agassi's book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is
And I
his
was like,
name
hey,
on the
which of those
cover?
three am I most interested in? His name is J.R. Moringer.
I
He
mean, I'm
wrote,
sure he's not on the cover, is he?
he's not, and he didn't want to be. He wrote a really fascinating piece for the New Yorker which starts with the process of writing Harry's book,
Hmm.
and then goes into just kind of like just his experience from his beginning writing his own novel to becoming a ghostwriter. And so I'm going to try to kind of study his craft because he's clearly one of the best in business. So I'm reading that. And then because I didn't read a lot of fiction when I was writing my book. I was constantly reading reference books for my own
Yep.
writing. Um, it's very hard for me to like pick out a fiction book that I want to read because it needs to be vetted by like a million people before I'm
Yep.
going to read it and spend my time on it.
Mhm.
So I picked up Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I haven't started it yet because I'm reading Shoe Dog, which I took out from the library.
Yep.
Um, so I got to finish that before it's due back. But then I'm gonna read hers next.
Awesome. Okay. We always love reading recommendations here. So perfect. I haven't read either one of those, so I'll put those on my list.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and just your honesty and your approach. And if people want to connect further with you, how can they find you?
On social media, on all the channels, I am just Alyssa Aegis. I'm most active on Instagram, but you can find me anywhere except YouTube. Because I don't know, that's weird. I'm just not on YouTube. I don't have anything to say on there. My website is alyssaagis.com, and there is a contact form on there if you have any questions, you want to talk to me. And then you can find Secrets of Giants, as far as I know, anywhere books are sold, if not in person. You can ask your local bookstore to order it for you. And
It's a
please,
good read. Highly recommend.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
In Her Words is hosted by me, Jessica Buchanan, and is produced by Soul Speak Press, a non traditional publishing house for women who are ready to tell their story. If you would like to know more about our submission process, I encourage you to check us out at www.soulspeakpress.com or follow us over on Instagram at soulspeakpress. We appreciate all your questions, and if you would like to leave us a review, we would be so grateful.